Hi everyone, I recently shared a completed page on my Instagram account from this book here. It's Anamorphia by Kirby Rosannes. This is the US edition. And this particular one, let's have a look, was first published in 2015. And it looks like this may be a 2015 copy. I didn't buy it back then, but I did buy it through Amazon, and it did come from the States. So the paper is a little bit different to what we're used to here in Australia. It's much thicker than what we normally have for Kirby books, and it's glue bound, it's not stitch bound, so it's a little bit different to what I'm used to. But I had a question about the background that I did on this page. Now, this was a long time whip. It was a bit of a labour of love. I started it and then fell out of love with it, and then recently thought about it again and finished it. So I used these water-soluble oil pastels for the background, and this particular brand is from Mont Marte, and it's 48 colours, and you might be able to see there that I paid the grand total of $16.95 Australian for these. So it was a couple of years ago in an art store. And it says in the description, smooth, buttery texture, suitable for a range of surfaces, including paper, card and canvas. Great colour blending. Handy hints, add water to create vibrant effects, creates graffito, I think that's how you pronounce it. Effects by scratching into thick layers. Use on canvas and apply oil mediums or terps with a brush to create glazes. Blend colours with your finger or a brush. So I bought these a few years ago, as I just mentioned, and I didn't like them. I did a couple of pages with them, and I just didn't really come to grips with how they worked at all. However, this background did work reasonably well. It has damaged the paper a little bit in that in a few places it has peeled the surface of the paper. And you might be able to see that if I try and catch the light on it. Let's see if we can get it. This area here is a little bit scuffed up. And a couple of other areas are a little bit rough, like over here. There you go, you can see that there. As a rule, that doesn't really bother me. I know it does bother some people, but it doesn't really bother me. And for the most part, I was quite happy with how this one turned out. Anyway, I had some questions about it. So I thought that what I might do is actually do a few tests in different books for you, just to give you a bit of a demonstration and show you how I actually got those effects. And since that point in time, I've actually got some different things that might work with them a little bit better. So I got that particular effect from that book using some wet wipes. So these are fragrance-free baby wipes that I'm using. You can also use, let me just get them. So you can also use these makeup wipes as well by wetting these makeup removal pads. And we will have a go with these, I think, while I'm experimenting here. So they're just those cotton pads that you take your makeup off with. So I've got a wet wipe here, and I'll just show you how I did that to start with for the Anamorphia book. So to start with, I'll start with a lighter colour, and I'm going to start with this sort of khaki green or olive green, and I'm just twisting that oil pastel into the wet wipe. Now, normal oil pastels, you need a solvent to blend with them, but these are water soluble, and I just use the wet wipe in this sort of twisting circular or half circular motion. And that's how I got most of the result on that page with the very colourful bird. Now what happens is, and it's already done it there a little bit, if you grind it into the paper and twist it, see how it's peeled the paper? So it's a really light touch that you're using when you're doing this. Now the paper in the Anamorphia book is thicker and it coped with it a little bit better than say a Amazon printed book will probably not cope with it at all. But if you've got a book with fairly thick paper and you're just doing very light touches, so I'm just twisting that in there because it's easier. You know, you can just scribble onto the wet wipe or whatever. And yeah, very light touches, just twist, like a twist motion. And you can do that all in one colour and build the colour up with one colour. Or I'm going to get a darker one here now. And, you know, it's all very random, it's very abstract. You know, there is some control with it, but it would really come down to you to play with the technique and trial different things yourself to see what effects you can get. But I like this sort of, you know, twisty, it's almost like a little circular whirlpool type of motion. And for this one, I've obviously picked the greens because this is going to be, you know, if I ever do it, it will be quite a lot of greens and leaves and natural sort of earthy tones. So that's how I do that. And you can do, you know, it's up to you to come up with your own combinations and so on, but I tend to, I've done a couple now. I'll show you another one in a minute. I may even put some clips in, but I filmed it yesterday and there was a lot of background noise, so I might just have to do a voiceover if I do include it. But so then you can, you know, experiment with getting all sorts of combinations of colour, and you can also just do some sort of dabbing sort of motions, and you'll get like a almost like a camouflage effect, you know. So it's up to you to just play with it, but that's what I did. I got a wet wipe and I just wiped some colour off of the tip of the water-soluble oil pastel, and then, you know, twisting circular motions or dabbing. But the trick is very lightly, because once that paper becomes damp, you can see, you might be able to see there that I've already started to pill up some of the paper. So let's just go over to this side and we'll have a go with these wet wipes. Now I don't have any water to hand, so what I will do is just use my water brush there to wet some. And again, just, you know, circular motions. It's not quite as effective as what the baby wipe was. So that's one way. I think another way that I was playing with it too was that I lightly coloured over some paper with the pastel direct on the page, and then I got the cotton wipe, dampened that a little bit, and I did that way. And it's just, again, a light touch because it is wet, And when the paper gets wet, you can see that it roughs up the surface. If you keep working over and over that same area, you're going to get it, you know, torn up very easily. So that's that particular method, and I'll just grab another book. So this is Anamorphia, the same copy that I showed you previously. And this is just a page that invites you to doodle and fill in the page yourself. Now I'm going to have a go with, let's have a look, some blues and aqua sort of colours, I guess, sea-like colours. And let's see if we can achieve anything with a dry. It's very hard to, yeah, you can't really do that on a dry cotton pad. You can kind of do it that way, but it's really hard to get the oil pastel to work on a dry cotton pad. So let's wet that. And get some colour on it that way. And you can sort of do some different you could start off with one colour and then mix in some other colours. And obviously that's a lot harder doing it that way. So let's just get a clean wet wipe. Now I'd just like to stress that this is just one way. It's not the way or the only way or the way you should use these oil pastels, but it is a way. And I came across this method because everything else that I had tried to that point gave me results that were unsatisfactory to me. You know, I didn't enjoy the look and I didn't enjoy the way that it felt working that way and so on. So this was just something that I came up with myself and it suited me. So it's just a way, not the way or the only way. So I think sometimes, you know, I like to stress that because sometimes people do demonstrations or do videos and they like to make it sound like their way is, you know, the magic way to do something. And this, you know, won't suit everybody. Pardon me. It feels a need for me, or, you know, it did at the time for what I had. And that's, you know, what I ran with. So you can see you can do sort of big sweeping motions, you know, if that's what suits you, or you can do little half circles, you know, like little, they're almost like little rosettes, you know, little whirlpools. And then you can sort of open it up again, and, you know, it's up to you to play around with the different ideas and layering different colours. You know, so start with your lightest colour maybe, and then, you know, work your way up to some darker colour. And if the page starts to get a bit too wet and you're worried about tearing, let it dry and then come back with another colour when it's dry. You know, wait in between if that is going to start causing a problem. So that is just another way that you can do it. Now recently I bought myself some gel crayons, and I found some old oil pastels and so on, and I was using these makeup brushes. So this one has been washed. The colour does stain the brush, but there's no transfer now because I've washed that. But what we might do is just have another go on another page. Let's see if we can find another one of these pages maybe. There we go. So this one's another one for doodling, you know, your own designs onto the page. So the another thing that I've been having a go with is picking up the colour from a plate. So I have already used this one. Let's just clean that off. So an old chopping board, anything that's sort of non-porous. I'm going to try some different colours here. You know, non-porous surfaces and so on. And we might do a little bit of maybe very deep purple. So yes, an old chopping board, or you know, anything that you can scrape a bit of colour off onto. So working with it dry, it will pick it up, but it is hard work, and you can apply the oil pastels that way. Now the thing with these water soluble oil pastels is that you've got two options. You've got the option to leave it dry, or you know, undiluted, or you can add some water, and I'll show you that in a moment. So picking up the darker colour there, you can see how it is hard work because it's quite dry, but you can get results of a sort there, and you can keep working at that. I'm applying quite a bit of pressure there now, and you can keep, you know, working at it. And it is entirely up to you what sort of result, what sort of look you want to create, you know, how much you want to work at it and so on. But, you know, I'm just showing you some options for how you can apply it and how you might want to use it. Okay, another thing that you can do is applying it to the plate and diluting that with some water. And I've also been trying that with these brushes, so it's a bit hit and miss, but that's pretty new to me as well, and I don't have a lot of water on there, so just bear with me a moment. So you can do it that way. Again, be very careful because you're rubbing it at the surface of the paper. It's going to peel quite easily, so that's another way that you can use it. You can also use it by diluting that with some water onto the plate. And you can apply it like a watercolour wash. So however you would normally paint with watercolour, you can apply it that way as well. And you can see I've got some undiluted bits there. Alright, so you do need to work at diluting it with the water a little bit. And you can also work directly onto the paper. That's with a light pressure there. And then you can dilute it or activate it with a water brush or a paintbrush and water, however you prefer to work. However you would normally work with your water-soluble products, so whether you're working with water-based markers, watercolour pencils, Inktense pencils or watercolour paints, however you normally like to work with anything water-based, same sort of concept here. So for example, we can put some water onto the page and then we can pick some pigment up off of the plate and we can apply it into the water that way as well. So I hope that gives you some ideas of methods to apply these particular water-soluble oil pastels. A bit of a mouthful. Now that is the only brand I have, and as I say, I've owned them for a few years. I haven't really used them much until recently because I just couldn't come to grips with them. I wouldn't say they're my most favourite type of medium to work with, but I'm going to keep playing with them. So now I'd like to show you this one that I was working on yesterday, and I'm really quite happy with the way the background worked on this one. It did come out quite well. However, I tried doing the whole page as basing the whole page, and I've got quite a bit of damage here on her face because I was very impatient and didn't want to wait for it to dry, and I kept coming back with different things with coloured pencil and more pastels and so on, and you can see that I have torn the paper up quite a bit there. I'll show you some of the texture that I built up by working with the water-soluble oil pastels over and over. This is Kirby Roseanne's Alien Worlds. And on this one, I first did a base with the Shuttle Art gel crayons, a new purchase that arrived yesterday. So I used those first, then I used some of the Mont Marte water-soluble oil pastels, and I also used some oil pastel. So this is like a true mixed media, and you might be able to see here that I've really built up the texture here in this corner, and I did that on purpose. I wanted to try and keep working at it to see what would happen. And this paper is quite thin. This is an Australian Alien Worlds, and the paper is very thin. It's not very heavy at all, and it did withstand all of that without bleeding through. I didn't use a lot of water, just a little bit of water to blend some of it out. The gel crayons, I used this thing. So it hasn't had a lot of water on it, but that's the effect that I've got there with that so far. And I wanted to share that with you just to show you that you can keep working at layering and layering with different products, and you can get quite a chunky, almost painterly effect. Now you may not be after that, you might not be, you might like carefully blended colours and surfaces, but I just thought I'd show you that as well. So I'm going to add in a little bit of footage from colouring this page here because it might be useful for you to see how I ended up damaging the area on her face. And also I work in slightly different ways because I tend to keep adapting and keep changing as I go along. I don't just hit on one way of working with something and only work in that manner. I like to just sort of keep doing whatever intuitively feels right at the time. Also, different paper is going to react differently to these methods as well. So it is a constant evolvement of how I work with things. And also sometimes I just get an idea and part way through I realise that I could use a kitchen sponge, so I end up cutting up a regular kitchen sponge and applying some colour with that as well. So I like to just sort of keep pushing the boundaries when it comes to things, and a lot of the time it's not even conscious thought, I just go with it. So here what I've done is applied the water-soluble oil pastel directly to the page and then using the damp wet wipe to blend and twist the colour on the page. So obviously a very light touch is needed. It is so easy to tear up the surface of the paper, and that's not just because the page is getting a little bit damp from the wet wipe. It's the fact that I'm agitating two surfaces against each other when the paper is actually damp. So those wet wipes are a little bit abrasive against the paper. They're almost like using sandpaper against it when they're wet or the paper is wet. So just keep that in mind if you're going to have a go with anything that I've shown you here, that once that paper is damp, it is really easy to tear it or disturb the surface of the paper, making it rough even if you don't actually tear it. So here I'm showing you that the makeup brush or makeup applicator that I bought to use with the gel highlighter crayons actually does work with these water-soluble oil pastels as well. The oil pastels are, very much more of a sticky, firm texture. So obviously anything that works with the gel crayons easily is not going to work with these oil pastels easily. I also use the water brush here to dilute some colour directly onto the plate. So everything that you've seen me do so far, I actually do try it all in this page as well. This was going to be my demo page, but because of the background noise, I also filmed the new footage and also some different books to work in as well. So what I do like about these water-soluble oil pastels is that you have a number of options open to you of how you are going to use them, and they all look slightly different on the paper. So they are quite versatile in that respect. I don't know that I feel 100% comfortable with them yet. So here I'm actually using the diluted colour with the applicator brush, and that does work a lot easier and more smoothly. So on a very smooth paper, as long as it doesn't tear up the surface, that can be quite nice as well for more of a finely blended effect, whereas working the other ways has given me a much more textured effect. So depending on what sort of subject you are colouring, or, excuse me one moment, depending on the subject of the illustration that you're colouring and your personal preferences, you've got a number of different ways that you can work with these oil pastels to create different effects and different looks. So if you are thinking about buying something like this, I do advise that you allow yourself plenty of time for playing and experimenting. So this has come about over several pages now and working different ways. The first time that I worked with them, I absolutely hated them, and I did buy these a few years ago. So that resulted in these oil pastels, or these water-soluble oil pastels, sitting in the drawer pretty much unused, because I really did not like the way they worked the first few times that I used them. And I think one of the reasons too was that I tried them in an Amazon printed book fairly early on, and the paper didn't cope with it at all well. So if I could stress anything, it would just be that experimenting and playing with them is a must, and also being prepared to maybe damage your paper before you actually get a feel for what you can actually do with them and how far to keep pushing them. If you keep that in mind, then you will probably have a nice time experimenting with them. I think they are reasonably versatile. You can also work with them dry and leave them undiluted. You don't have to dilute them if you don't want to. That's entirely up to you as well. So what I would say is with any sort of crayon or pastel like this, it is difficult to get some very fine details. It's easier if you start to think in terms of more abstract or very loose layering of colour, rather than maybe finely blended details and so on. That will give you an idea of what sort of things these products are perfect for. So they are really very good for backgrounds and anything that, you know, a large area that you want to cover quickly. So it really is a process here of building the colour up. I started with the lightest colour and just kept going with darker and darker colour, and I had no plan in mind other than to make it look like an out of focus background. So I'm using colours that I think I'm going to add into the actual main subject of the picture as well. So I chose those colours because I knew that I'd probably want to use those in the owl. And you can see there that I'm using that wet wipe there that's got a lot of colour on it now to just lightly lay down some colour on the other items on the page. So here I'm thinking about some colour for the background for the girl. Now I just want to put some really light colour down, so covering that big area quickly like I just mentioned. And the idea here was that I wanted to have some very, very pale colour and just start building things up. But pretty quickly I decided to, let's put some that colour directly onto the paper, much more bold and bright, and see how that works. And I also wanted to give myself some options for further down the track, whether I want to overlay coloured pencil on there or not. At this point in time, I don't have any plans. I'm just thinking about possibilities. So I was thinking if I put the colour on lightly, I could layer up colour with coloured pencils or something else. But as it happens, as it progresses, I just keep going with these water-soluble oil pastels and keep building up colour. So you will see that I try lots of different things. So this isn't a video to show you the absolute step-by-step process of colouring a page from beginning to the end. It's more about an exploration of techniques and how to lay down those colours, and I'm still working it out myself. So this is very much how I approach colouring pages when I'm not 100% sure what my art materials are going to do for me. And you know, I set out to do this page as a demonstration or play page, so I didn't really have high expectations for how the page was going to end up. I actually do end up liking the page a lot, but at this point in time I still don't know what's going to happen with it, and I'm thinking in terms of what will happen if I do this. What will happen if I try this? Will I be able to let it dry and put some coloured pencil on later? Will I be able to overlay some gel pens or some other sorts of markers? I'm still very much in that experimental thinking and experimental page. So please don't see this as a start to finish colour along. It's more about showing you how my thought process goes and jumps around all over the place while I'm working out what these things can actually do for me. I'm also at this stage open to leaving things just as oil pastels. So when I find something that I like, that I enjoy, and that I'm thinking that the result is looking pretty good or the effect is looking pretty good, I will keep trying that and going with that, and possibly changing my mind as I go. That little area that I'm dabbing at now, you can see that I've actually torn the paper a little bit, and that's where I had already diluted the oil pastel and then came back and rubbed more oil pastel onto the wet paper, and it has torn the surface and I've got a little bit of pilling there. So I didn't learn my lesson by that, and as the page progresses you will see that I damaged some other areas as well. And I think of this all as part of the learning process. So that damage to me is, while it's, you know, a little bit sad in terms of the finished page, it ruins the effect quite a bit, but it's all part of the process of learning, and without actually doing that, I don't learn or fully understand at what point I should be stopping until I've actually done it and experienced it. So I never really look at these play pieces as being a failure if I do that sort of stuff, because it means that the next time that I colour in this book, I'll know to pull back a little bit sooner. I'll know not to keep pushing things, or possibly get the hairdryer out and dry it off a little bit quicker before I keep going, and so on and so on. So sometimes these undesirable things that happen teach you much more than everything going perfectly first time. So here it's not only becoming a process of playing with the material. So you can see there I still didn't learn my lesson and I'm pushing it again. That paper isn't quite dry yet, and here I am putting more on and more water. So sometimes, you know, I just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. So at this point of the picture, it's not just about the techniques of applying the art supplies, it's also starting to become a little bit of a playtime for colour. And I decided on the natural earthy colours for the background because I wanted to do the owl in those sorts of colours, so that's where that came about. But once I'd put that lovely aqua blue onto her kimono, I started to think about how nice that was playing against the yellow ochres and the browns and so on, and how it really lifted it. And then I decided to put that colour into the owl, into her hair and other areas around the picture. So what was going to be quite a monochromatic colour scheme of natural colours and perhaps that little bit of yellow, suddenly I started thinking in terms of the aqua and then, you know, like a really nice vivid green and so on. And it started to really make those other natural colours really pop and have a vibrancy about them that wasn't there beforehand. So I start to think about where can I use these different colours differently, and here I'm having a go at actually lifting some colour from the pastel itself with the damp brush, and that is very subtle. That's a very subdued, subtle colour that I'm able to lift off of there, and then I start applying it around to other parts of the page as well. So I did begin thinking of natural colours for the owl, but once I had used that aqua, or aqua blue I guess, it really did start to make the other natural colours around it sing. So I just thought that because I had the very abstract out of focus background, and the way that Camilla Derrico has drawn this image is not particularly realistic either, it would be fun to just keep playing with different colours and different effects at this point. Here I'm just showing you that I do have some bleed through. So where I worked over and over on that wet paper with the oil pastel directly onto the wet paper, and that was the area of her kimono, has pushed the colour through the page. So you can see that little bit of bleed through there. Also where I was damaging the surface of the paper, it's allowing the pigment to travel through it a little bit easier. But the background itself has not bled through. It's all looking pretty good on the other side. So here I have started to put some colour onto her face, and you can see there that I'm rubbing at an area that has already started to get a little bit of damage. So not content with that, I am still pushing it and putting more colour on even though that damage is there. So I'm thinking about, can I use the oil pastel directly onto the paper and maybe smudge it with my finger or do some different effects with it, to try and disguise that tear. But instead of waiting for it to dry completely, I just keep pushing the boundaries and I tear it worse and worse. So here I'm going to have a go with a cotton bud. So I've applied the pastel directly to the paper, and I'm just smearing that or spreading that colour with a cotton bud, and it is an even more subtle colour for her lips there. On her cheeks, that's got several layers of colour now, so I've used that sort of peachy colour as a base layer, and now I'm putting some pink into it as well. But there you go, I've torn it again. So I just keep pushing. I think because I'm recording it, I just want to get it over and done with. But it hadn't occurred to me to get the hairdryer out and dry it out completely. So at this point on the right hand side, that's not looking too torn up, but I do end up tearing that as well. So just showing you a different way here. Where you want to be a little bit more detailed and a bit more carefully blended, you can use a cotton bud, we call them here in Australia, or a Q-tip, whatever you know them as. Just using one of those to help blend the colours a little bit more carefully and get into smaller, tighter areas with it. The oil pastels themselves, you can of course break them. That will give you like a nice clean hard edge, because as you've used the oil pastel, you can see the tip there is becoming very rounded and not that easy to get into small areas. But you can break your pastels and, form a hard, sharp edge if you want to do it that way. But I decide to use the cotton bud to blend the colours out and move it around on the page to where I want it to be. You can erase the oil pastels a little bit too. I use a battery operated eraser on another page, and I do actually manage to lift some back off with that little tiny small battery eraser. So my advice again is to try and think outside of the box with different things that you can use to help blend and move the oil pastels around on your paper. You don't have to dilute them every time, and again, this might not be the ideal way of portraying skin and a face, but at this point I'm still learning the limits and the possibilities of this art medium. On her hair, I have started to build up quite heavy layers of, heavy layers of the oil pastel. And I'm finding that the more and more thicker layers that you have of these oil pastels, the further you can manipulate and push it around with the cotton buds. So you can start to build up a lot of texture. You can also move it around, smear it, get different effects and so on by layering heavier and heavier layers of colour. When they're thick like this, you can also scrape into it and actually remove some of the colour. So that puts a bit of a highlight back in, or it shows the layers that you have underneath start to come through that top layer of colour. I realise that some of this footage is quite repetitive, that I'm showing you the same sorts of things over and over, but I thought it might be helpful for you to see how I try to use such an unwieldy, sort of bulky art supply as these oil pastels are in a detailed and small area like this. So again, I just really want to show you some ideas of how to use the art supplies, and it's up to you to then experiment and find your way, but it might give you some little ideas to get you started and to prompt you that your imagination might take over, and you'll start thinking of different ways that you can use these sorts of art supplies yourself. Unfortunately, I had to cut a whole heap of footage out that showed how I used the coloured pencil. But essentially what I did was wait for the diluted areas to dry fully and then have a go again with the coloured pencil, and of course it worked much better. You can see the damage there that I did to her face by working over and over wet paper. When using the pencils over the diluted base of oil pastels, it gave it a bit of texture for the pencils to grab onto, and it really did help make the pigment of the coloured pencils very vibrant, and I like the effect that created. Working over the undiluted oil pastel means that you scrape through those layers of pastel. So the thicker and heavier the layer of oil pastel, the pencil just basically lifts it all back off, and it does show you the earlier layers of colour underneath. So that can be a useful technique in its own right. And again, I would really advise that you try all of these things on a test piece before you commit to a page that you really enjoy or are proud of, because you can inadvertently do lots of damage or create effects that maybe are not quite so desirable. But once you've got the hang of it, I think the coloured pencil over the diluted base of oil pastel is really pretty, and I'm really happy with the way that turned out. I looked at some original paintings of Camilla Derico to get the idea for the different coloured eyes and how to do the lips and so on, and I'm quite happy with the way that this turned out. To finish up, I'm just going to show you again some close-up vision of the page so you can see some of the details. And I really do like the way that coloured pencil has helped put some detail back into the face. If I hadn't torn that paper there, I would have been really happy with the way that this face ended up. I used some of the aqua and the blue in her skin tone as well, and it just really made a nice effect. I'm actually very happy with this page. It's got quite a painterly look about it. You can see on the owl there I've got some thick areas of pastel as well. It looks very textural, very painterly, and I'm really quite happy with that. I don't know that I would call these one of my favourite art mediums, but I certainly will be using them again. So I thought I would tack on the end of the video here this clip, and it is an R.J. Hampson book, Dragon Dreams. It's Amazon Australia printed, and I'm going to use a regular kitchen sponge that I'm cutting up here into small pieces. As I work with these experimental pages, sometimes things occur to me while I'm doing the page, and then other times I put the book aside and I get a sudden idea to try something different, and that's what happened with the kitchen sponge. So my intention was that I would like to try these water-soluble oil pastels on various types of paper and various types of illustration styles, just to see what is the best application for this particular art medium. I have explained that I've owned these pastels for quite some time, and it's taken me a long time to feel comfortable to play with them and get some different ideas of how to apply them. And now that I have, I'm quite enjoying playing with them. I don't know that they will become a staple item in the majority of pages, but they certainly are going to work for some books better than others, and they're also going to suit some illustration styles better than others. So with this kitchen sponge, I'm applying the oil pastel directly to the sponge itself and adding a bit of extra water there with a water brush. And I'm using the same sort of light dabbing or twisting motion as I did with the wet wipes. And here I'm just actually dabbing it. Because the sponge has a different textured surface, it is creating a different look. So I'm just playing with that, having a go with different techniques, different ways to apply it, to see how it's going to turn out on a page. I think that the kitchen sponge here is working pretty well. It does need a very light touch again, of course. It's still going to disturb the surface of the paper. But I was thinking that long term this might be a little bit of a more eco-friendly, budget-friendly idea over the wet wipes, because you can keep rinsing the sponge out and reusing it. The wet wipes do have a short lifespan, but I'm thinking that the kitchen sponge, or any sort of sponge, is going to be a bit more of a environmentally friendly and budget friendly option. The result is different to the wet wipe. I'm not getting the same sort of rosette look that I did with the wet wipe, but this is a different texture, and it's going to suit different types of illustration styles, I think. I'm not too concerned about going over the edges of the drawing, because I have done a couple of pages prior to this point. I know that once those oil pastels have been diluted with water, that I can actually put coloured pencil over the top of it. So in my mind at this time, I'm thinking, well, once it's dry, I might be able to use the Languo gel pens because they're very opaque. I might be able to use dry pastels, chalk pastels for example. I might be able to use acrylic paint pens, acrylic markers or so on, water-based markers, or even acrylic paint itself. So anything that's opaque is going to go over the top of it. And then something like a coloured pencil or a chalk pastel might work because the water-soluble oil pastel does make a bit of a texture to the paper. So those sorts of products might actually overlay as well. So here at the bottom, I'm just applying the pastel in different ways to the paper, having a go with the sponge in different ways. I was wondering whether I might be able to smear that out to make it look like there's a lot of movement in the page. So just really playing with different ways of applying it. And I had this small bottle of rubbing alcohol, and I thought that I would have a go. Well, actually, I don't know if it is rubbing alcohol. It's isopropyl alcohol. Just having a go to see how that works, and it really doesn't make any difference. It works just like the water did. So I just thought while I had it there, I would experiment with that as well, see whether that has any different effect. So I hope that you have enjoyed seeing me use some different techniques, some different things to dilute and blend and move the water-soluble oil pastel. I don't know that they will become something that I use all the time, but they certainly are a lot of fun to play with. And once again, I'm not suggesting that you rush out and buy some water-soluble oil pastels, but if you have them and you haven't thought of using them in this way, it will give you some ideas. And if you were already thinking about buying them, this will give you some ideas of how they might work in your colouring books. So thank you for watching. I will probably have a few more pages yet that you will see me work on with these oil pastels while I come to terms with them, and also some other things that I want to try working in a mixed media style with them. So until the next video, I'll say goodbye for now. Take care everyone, and happy colouring.